He walked away from a suburban house, a stable income, and everything most people spend their entire lives trying to keep, and moved his family to one of the most unforgiving pieces of land in North America. Dennis Westerlind, the man behind Holdfast Alaska, built a subsistence homestead in Alaska's remote Copper River Basin from absolute scratch, with no road in winter, no power grid, and temperatures that regularly drop to 50 degrees below zero. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what kind of person stands between a family and the life they're trying to build in the wilderness, and why Dennis has finally started talking about it. Most people who watch Holdfast Alaska assume Dennis Westerlind always lived like this. They see a man who moves through ice and darkness with the calm of someone born to it. That assumption misses the entire story. Dennis did not grow up in Alaska. He grew up in suburban America, the kind of environment where the biggest logistical challenge of the week is finding a parking spot, and the wildest animal you encounter is a raccoon in the trash. His life before the channel looked, by most conventional measures, entirely normal. A house, a neighborhood, the rhythms of modern life that most people never question because questioning them feels dangerous. What changed, and Dennis has spoken about this across multiple videos, was a growing recognition that the life he was living did not match the life he wanted to be responsible for. The word he uses, and it is worth paying attention to it, is holdfast. It comes from the natural world. A holdfast is the root structure that anchors kelp to the ocean floor against powerful currents. It does not fight the force, it holds. That philosophy became the operating principle for a decision that everyone around him thought was reckless. Moving a family to a remote piece of property in Alaska's interior, with no established infrastructure, no guarantee of food security, and winters that routinely kill the unprepared, that is not a lifestyle upgrade. That is a fundamental rejection of the assumptions that govern how most Americans live. The channel launched in February 2021. In those early videos, you can see the gap between the idea and the reality. The property was raw, the plan was directional at best, and the obstacles waiting for them, one in particular, had not yet shown their face. And if you think that was the hard part, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The Copper River Basin is not the Alaska of tourist photographs. It is not Denali framed against a blue sky or salmon jumping into the open hands of a bear in a nature documentary. It is interior Alaska, flat in places, brutally cold, remote in a way that has genuine consequences. Dennis and his family settled into a small community in this region. Not a town, not even a village in the modern sense. A scattering of people, spread across enormous distances, who share one thing: the need to extract almost everything they consume from the land itself. This is subsistence living, not as a romantic concept, but as a logistical system. When something in that system fails, people go without. The Copper River is the artery of this world. The sockeye salmon run that moves through it every summer is not recreational. It is the food calendar. A fish wheel, a traditional rotating basket device that scoops fish from the current without requiring constant human presence, is not a novelty. It is the difference between a full winter pantry and an empty one. What the audience of Holdfast Alaska has watched, across more than 185 videos and 37 million views, is Dennis learning this system from the ground up. He had no inherited knowledge of it, no family member who taught him how to build a smoker, or what it means when the river breaks up in spring, or how to pack 8,000 gallons of water by hand when the pipes freeze. Every single piece of that knowledge was earned in the field, often in circumstances that left no margin for error. That context matters, because the hardest obstacles Dennis has ever faced were not the weather, and they were not the land, they were people. Specifically, a category of person that thrives in the gap between what remote Alaska promises and what it actually delivers. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Remote land in Alaska has a particular economy around it, and it is not always an honest one. When someone from the lower 48 decides they want to build a life in the Alaskan interior, they enter a market where the information asymmetry is enormous. The buyer does not know the land. They cannot assess it properly from a distance. They cannot verify water access, road conditions in breakup season, or what happens to a particular drainage when the snow melts in May. The people who sell in this market know all of that, and some of them count on the buyer not knowing. Dennis has documented, across his origin story videos and in comments and community posts over the years, that the path to their property was not clean. Finding legitimate land, at a legitimate price, with honest disclosure of what it actually involved, was not the experience they had with everyone they encountered in that process. There were sellers who presented land as more accessible than it was. There were intermediaries who charged for guidance and delivered very little of it. There were moments, in that early phase, when the family was genuinely uncertain whether they had made a catastrophic mistake, not because of Alaska, but because of the people who had positioned themselves to profit from people trying to get to Alaska. This is a pattern that repeats across the subsistence homesteading world, and it is one Dennis has become increasingly direct about. The land itself is neutral. It does not deceive. A river in flood does not pretend to be something it is not. People, in Dennis's experience, are a different story. The version of this story that his audience does not fully know is what that deception cost them in the early years, and how close it came to ending the entire thing before it started. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. The first winter on the Holdfast property tested everything, and not only because of the cold, though the cold is real in a way that most people watching from a warm living room cannot fully metabolize. Temperatures in the Copper River Basin regularly reach 40 below, and in exceptional winters, the thermometer drops past 50. At those temperatures, exposed skin freezes in minutes. Machinery that worked perfectly in autumn refuses to start. Diesel fuel gels. Wood fires become not a comfort but a survival imperative. What the first winter also revealed was a second category of problem. When you are that remote and something goes wrong, the people you depend on for parts, for supplies, for the basic inputs that a homestead cannot produce for itself, those people have leverage over you, and some of them know it. Dennis documented a 17-hour winter supply run that became one of his most watched videos, with over 1.3 million views. What that video captures is not just the logistics of driving hundreds of miles across Alaska in winter conditions. It captures the dependence. Every single item in that truck represents something the family cannot yet produce for itself, and therefore something that had to come from someone else, at someone else's price, on someone else's timeline. In the early period of building the homestead, before the fish wheel was producing, before the garden was established, before the subsistence systems were functioning, that dependence was total. And there were people in that supply chain who were not operating in good faith. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Norder's Pistil is the most important infrastructure piece in the Holdfast operation. Dennis built his first one, learned from it, lost one to the river, rebuilt, and eventually, in the summer of 2025 and into 2026, expanded the operation to build wheels not just for his family but for his broader village community. His video building and launching a fish wheel on the Copper River has now crossed 1.4 million views. The Community Wheel series that followed has driven a subscriber surge of 32,000 people in a single month. None of that would exist if a specific person, or more accurately, a specific type of person, had succeeded in doing what they attempted in the early years of the channel. Dennis has spoken, in fragments across multiple community posts and in video commentary, about a figure in his early experience in Alaska who actively worked against what they were building. This was not a competitor. It was not a stranger. This was someone in a position of proximity, someone who had early knowledge of the Westerlind family's presence in the region, who understood what they were trying to build, and who attempted, through a combination of legal obstruction and social maneuvering, to either acquire the land the family was building on, or to make the permit and access situation sufficiently complicated that they would give up and leave. The specific mechanism was access. In remote Alaska, access is everything. The road, or the seasonal path that functions as one, that connects a remote property to the nearest point of resupply, is not guaranteed. It passes through other land. It requires agreements, and in some cases permits, that can be contested. When someone withstanding to contest that access decides to do so, the effect on a family that has committed everything to a property is not theoretical. It is immediate, and it is severe. She never talked about this publicly, until now. The way Dennis resolved the access problem was not through litigation, and it was not through confrontation. It was through community. This is the part of the story that the audience watching the fish wheel videos does not always fully understand. When Dennis builds a fish wheel for the village, when he spends his time and materials on infrastructure that serves people beyond his own family, that is not just generosity. That is strategy. Deliberate, patient, long-term strategy. In remote Alaska, social capital is real capital. The person who is known as the family that helps, that builds wheels for elders who cannot, that shares the harvest, that shows up when something needs doing, That person has a community standing that cannot be legally contested or bureaucratically eroded. It becomes the most durable form of protection available. The person who tried to obstruct the Westerlinds in those early years operated on the assumption that they were isolated, that they had arrived with no relationships, no history, no standing. That was accurate at first. It stopped being accurate because of a choice Dennis and his family made, consistently, over years, to build relationships rather than to protect against the absence of them. The video, Building a Fish Wheel for Our Village, captures the outcome of that choice. Not the process, the outcome. A family that arrived in the Copper River Basin as outsiders had become, through the accumulation of genuine mutual aid, something the most obstructive person in their early experience could not undo. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What he did instead is the part nobody talks about. In April 2025, Dennis uploaded a video that on the surface had nothing to do with any of this. It was a video about making a sourdough starter, the way it was done 100 years ago. No measuring, no recipe, just the method that people used before the era of precise kitchen tools. That video has now crossed 1 million views and generated nearly 40,000 likes, the highest engagement rate of any video on the channel. The comments on that video are not about sourdough. They are about the idea of building something durable, using only what is available to you. They are about the appeal of a method that does not depend on anyone else's supply chain. They are about self-sufficiency as a philosophy rather than a lifestyle aesthetic. And many of them, particularly in the thread that runs deepest in the comment section, are from people who understand, intuitively, that the man teaching them this method has been tested in ways that go beyond baking bread. The sourdough video matters because it crystallizes something Dennis has been demonstrating across 185 videos in 5 years. The antidote to a person who tries to take something from you is not confrontation, it is competence. When you can produce your own food, process your own fish, generate your own power from a repurposed cell tower generator, heat your home with wood you cut yourself, and haul 8,000 gallons of water by hand, the leverage that a hostile person holds over you collapses. The most evil person Dennis ever dealt with was powerful precisely because the Westerlind family, in the beginning, was dependent. That dependence was the weapon, and the entire body of work that is Holdfast Alaska is the documentation of how that weapon was made obsolete. One phone call, one conversation, that's all it took to change the direction of everything. As of July 2026, Holdfast Alaska is in the most significant growth phase of its 5-year existence. The channel crossed 247,000 subscribers, with 32,000 of those coming in a single 30-day period. The July 4th video, Living Off the Land in Alaska's Copper River Basin, pulled over 1 million views and is currently generating more than 400 views per hour. The Fish Wheel series, Building, Launching, Losing, and Rebuilding, has become the dominant narrative of the past 2 months, with individual videos crossing 1.4 million views. The community expansion is real and documented. Dennis is now building fish wheels for other people in his village, not just for his family. The subsistence operation that began as a survival necessity has grown into a genuine contribution to a broader community food system. The person who tried to stop this, the obstructive early figure whose actions nearly ended the homestead project before it had a foundation, is no longer in a position to affect what has been built. Communities do not hold the same shape forever, and the Westerlinds have long since outgrown the vulnerability that made them a target. What they have now is not what they were promised when they arrived. It is better. It was built by hand, in the cold, through years of documented effort, and against at least one person who actively tried to prevent it. That person failed. The fish wheel, spinning in the Copper River, is the evidence. Every obstacle has a human face. In Dennis Westerlind's case, the most damaging one arrived not in the form of a blizzard or a river flood, but as a person with legal knowledge and proximity, and the willingness to use both against a family that had staked everything on a dream that was, at the time, very easy to kill. What Holdfast Alaska is becoming: a 247,000 subscriber channel documenting subsistence life in interior Alaska with a community fish wheel program and a homestead that genuinely feeds a family through the winter. Exists because Dennis made a different choice than the one that would have been easier. He chose to build relationships instead of defenses. He chose competence over confrontation. He chose to make himself indispensable to his community, rather than to isolate himself within it. The next chapter is already visible in the most recent uploads: a growing pack string of horses for backcountry access, an expanding village fish wheel program, and a homestead that is now moving from survival mode into something that looks unmistakably like a permanent life. Do you think Dennis made the right call, choosing community over confrontation? Or do you think there's a point where you have to fight back directly? Let me know below.